You know, one of the things that I find really difficult to treat in my private practice, and even in other areas where I'm a therapist or I'm some kind of contractor or expert, is the narcissistic parent. Now, I love good parents, and I try to say that a lot on my channel to make sure that I'm giving a balanced perception of my view of narcissism. So I want to put that out there. I love good parents. The problem that I have, however, is when I see a parent really struggling with their child or their adult child because of some issues that have been unresolved within them. There's a lot of people in this world, and probably the entire world, where you're gonna always find a parent with a problem, right? Like, it's just reality that, parents are human beings, and sometimes they have a lot of issues that they don't get help for, and as a result, they end up harming their child or their adult child. But I find that treating narcissistic parents is one of the most difficult things to do because, number one, they feel like I'm a parent, so I have a level of control over what I want my children to see, and that includes adult children as well. Sometimes these kind of parents would rather take a position of defensiveness and state that the child is the problem or the adult child is the problem, rather than to go within and to look within. Basically, it's hard for a narcissistic parent to go within because in that search of what's going on the inside, they are likely to bump up against or tap into some areas of unresolved anger, low self-esteem, some kind of emotional distress, pinned up anger and resentment within themselves, and probably a host of other issues. So it's a lot easier for them to just point at the child and say, you know what, it's my child that is the problem. There's a few other issues going on here at the core of the narcissistic parent, and so I'm going to pull that apart in today's video. But before we jump into that, let me just briefly introduce myself in case you were new. My name is Tamara. I'm internationally and board certified as a trauma therapist. I'm licensed in mental health. I specialize in treating children, teens, and families, as well as adults who are dealing with trauma. Let's go ahead and jump in. Narcissism is one of those topics where, you could just have a series of videos on this specific topic and never get off of it. And I feel like that's kind of what happens on my channel. We talk about a narcissistic parent, or we talk about narcissistic families, and there I am creating a bunch of videos for you guys, or doing live chats on this particular topic. The topic of narcissism is huge, and that's one of the reasons why the makers of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, it's a little book that's practically as thick as a Bible. It's not the Bible, but it is thick as a Bible, and it has within it and through its pages a variety of mental health conditions that have been agreed upon and semi-researched by man to be something that, can help us make sense out of mental illnesses and mental health conditions. In the DSM, it was originally, in DSM-5, it was originally going to be removed. And, that's a pretty intense argument I'm not going to get into in this video. But narcissism is complicated, and that's why it was originally going to be removed from the DSM. But as time went on and as more research became available, it became evident that narcissism needed to stay in the DSM as a clinical syndrome, as a clinical disorder, as something that needs to be treated clinically. Now, will that narcissistic parent step up and say, you know what, I'm wrong, I think I do need help? No. The narcissistic parent is probably going to end up in a scenario or a situation where they're either going to have to accept what you're telling them, which is, Mom, you have an issue, Dad, you have an issue, or they're going to get into some kind of court situation where they are court ordered to go to psychotherapy. And in other cases, it's a legal matter where, a parent hasn't done what they're supposed to do, and therefore it's been recommended the treatment is the most important thing for them to pursue. So most narcissistic parents are not going to say, I have an issue, right? So because of that, it's hard to treat them, but it's also hard to put that in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual as a clinical issue when it's really a powerful personality problem. Now, let me just give you a little bit of a broad view of narcissism. We have, as part of the criteria of narcissistic personality disorder, patterns of grandiosity. We have aggression that is often at the core of narcissism, reduced tolerance and reactivity. And then we also have affective dysregulation. And here's the word right here, affective dysregulation, which means that there is a poor regulation of emotional responses to things. The individual tends to be very reactive. There may also be some substance abuse, as it is commonly a comorbid mental health condition, meaning that it's often standing side by side narcissistic personality disorder. So narcissistic personality and substance abuse tend to be one of those disorders that co-occur, or they happen at the same time. At the core of a narcissistic parent may also be this fragile ego. So this inability to really just be firm in identity and firm within themselves. It's this fragile ego that gets hurt very easily and can complicate the parent-child relationship. Now, there are two important narcissists that I think that you should be aware of. One is the vulnerable narcissist, and two is the grandiose narcissist. Now, these narcissistic parents or individuals tend to be pretty separate, but there's a lot of overlap too in how they behave and how they think. Let me start with the grandiose parent. Now, there's this overt narcissism in the grandiose parent. They tend to show these narcissistic characteristics where they are, praising themselves and going after people who praises them, and they get some kind of mental and emotional stimulation from praise and rewards and positive reinforcement. There's also at times this aggressive disposition that they take. They tend to feel that they are so high up and so wonderful and so great and so holy that no one can offend them and no one should offend them. The other piece of this narcissistic parent is that they are bold, and bold meaning they run over your boundaries, right? They don't know how to respect what is yours. They don't know how to respect what you need, what you're asking them to give you or to show you, right? They don't consider all of that. You're not important to them. So the grandiose parent tends to be very bold, aggressive, and they walk all over your boundaries. You really have to have firm boundaries with this particular kind of parent. There's also a lack of empathy, of course. Narcissists do not have what we call TOM or Tom theory of mind, which is an individual's ability to put themselves into the shoes of somebody else and to presuppose and to suppose, I wonder how this person is going to feel if I do this, or what if I said this, they may do A, B, and C, right? The narcissistic parent doesn't have that ability. That's one of the reasons why narcissistic parents tend to be abusers. And they also tend to create these trauma bonds with their children, because what happens is the narcissistic parent doesn't have the love and affection and the ability to look at you as a child, as a baby, and say, this is what you need. This is what I know you enjoy. This is what I know is going to make you feel loved and safe. A lot of their behavior tends to be done to get some kind of social reward, and sometimes some kind of internal reward, from people who are watching them be a mother, people who are watching them be a father. So this grandiose parent, kind of has this view of themselves that's lofty, and yet that view is so incorrect, because the way they treat their children does not afford them that position at the top like they think. Let me also say that there's exploitation of other people as well with the grandiose narcissist. They exploit your rights. They exploit, your needs and your thoughts and so forth. They just, exploit you. And sometimes they manipulate and take advantage of you as well in a way where you walk away feeling abused emotionally. You feel manipulated. You feel triangulated, right? Because this particular parent has learned not only how to keep themselves in that lofty position, but also how to keep you down. And so in order to keep you down, they have to have these power plays, right? They have to sound a certain way. They have to look a certain way. They have to be a certain way. They have to keep up the status quo so that they can stay up here and you down here. Now, let me clarify that there's nothing wrong with a parent. My mom is the same way. I see lots of parents in my practice who are like this. There's no harm and nothing wrong with a parent who simply wants respect, right? And sometimes there are strict parents, and sometimes there are really lofty parents who demand, depending on culture and, parental beliefs and so forth, depending on all of that, there are some parents who are just like that, right? They have a lofty view of themselves. It's not necessarily arrogant, but they do demand, respect, And then there are also those parents in different cultures, like the Jamaican culture, the African American culture, the Native American culture, which runs through my veins as well. They tend to be very lofty as parents, right? They are loving, they are caring, they give their all to you, but at the same time, they expect something in return, which is, I'm up here and you're here. It doesn't matter how old you are. I deserve respect and you're going to show it to me. Let me also go to the vulnerable narcissist in this discussion, because this particular narcissist is an interesting parent because they tend to be very hypersensitive. If you as a child or an adult child do not meet their emotional and psychological needs, then they may start blaming themselves. They may actually take on the appearance of being depressed. They may actually take on the mindset that they are not good people. Now, these individuals may also engage in suicidal behavior. They may also have a diagnosis, another co-occurring disorder or comorbid disorder known as borderline personality disorder. It's interesting because females with borderline personality disorder has been shown in research to also carry some narcissistic and sociopathic traits. Now, are we lacking in research on that? Absolutely. I think we need a whole lot more. But there has been some research studies that has made that association between borderline personality disorder and narcissism, and borderline personality disorder and sociopathy. So there's some overlap there. And keep in mind that, what I'm talking about in today's video, which is narcissistic parents, they are cluster B personality disorders. And let me go over those for you. And you can learn a little bit more in this video right up here about cluster B personality traits. But cluster B, which is in the category of narcissistic parents, would be antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, and then we also have borderline personality disorder. That is cluster B. And here's what you're going to get in cluster B, And so there's a lot of overlap between these things. And as a result, it's hard to determine, is this a narcissist? Is this someone with borderline personality disorder? What is this that I'm dealing with, So it really does take a trained and well-educated professional to really highlight those things for you. This kind of a parent can really rock your world. They can be very defensive against you and you don't know why. They can be very condescending at times as well. And because they take on that affect or that facial look as if they are depressed and down, you may find yourself a little bit confused, by the narcissistic parent who seems really sad and quiet, and the next minute they're ready to chop your head off in defensive-ness, And the big issue here, though, is, this particular parent may be vulnerable. They have a lot of egocentric problems. They are, really ego-sensitive, if you will. And they tend to have a lot of stormy up and down relationships because they can come across one way, but at the core, don't step on their toes because they're going to bite you back because they are narcissistic at the core. They can't tolerate any kind of injuries. There's a term in the field known as narcissistic injury. Here's the definition right here on the screen. And vulnerable narcissists and vulnerable narcissistic parents tend to have what's called narcissistic injuries. And if you offend them or stand up for yourself or push them back or somehow set a new boundary, then they flip on you, right? You're a whole different person at that point to them. And you may see a very defensive, angry, easily offended, hypersensitive person and be shocked, and really kind of confused as to how they became this way. All you said was, I need this boundary, or all you did was put up that boundary, right? That is a narcissistic injury to a narcissist. They don't want you to set boundaries for them. They want you to go along and get along, right? So keep that in mind about these particular parents. There are narcissistic parents who tend to be grandiose, and they also most likely tend to be vulnerable. And it just depends on which one you have, right? Because you can have either or. And of course, there's other narcissists, like the malignant narcissist, right? Those narcissists are just as difficult to understand as the vulnerable and the grandiose narcissist, These are all subtypes, and I'm going to come back and do another video on subtypes so that we can get into this a little bit more. Let me say that sometimes the aggression that you see within the parent who's a narcissist is a clear indication of the severity of the disorder. So here's what I'm saying. Research has suggested that if you have a a severe narcissistic personality disorder, it's really going to show forth through your aggression. Do you step on people's feet and shoes and try to get away with it? Do you fight and argue with people unnecessarily? Do you physically, emotionally, and sexually abuse your children? Do you push everyone's buttons and disregard their boundaries, right? What is the level of aggression that you live your life by as the parent? And if you can identify the intensity of their aggression, then you most likely have identified the severity of the disorder. Okay, so keep that in mind. Severity of the aggression, right? So let me give you a visual on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, 1 being, not so bad after all, right? So 10, let's say your parent's aggression is way up here at a 10, then most likely their narcissistic personality disorder is either equal or greater. The next thing that I want you to kind of think about is, there are huge social limits with these particular narcissists. They have a hard time really being in relationship with other people. They have a hard time being in a relationship to their own child. And as you grow up and become an adult under a parent like this, you're going to find it really difficult to live a life with this particular parent, because they're going to want their way and you're going to demand respect. They're going to want to get over on you and you're going to say, nope, that's not how that goes. And so because of that, it's going to make the relationship a little bit tricky. These kind of parents are really ego sensitive. Now, the grandiose narcissist tends to be a little bit more pompous and arrogant, right? So if you do something to set a boundary with this particular parent, you can guarantee that somehow you're going to be punished for what you have done, whatever that is. For the vulnerable narcissist, however, if you try to set a boundary, they may feel really hurt and defensive, and you've got the hypersensitive parent, right, that's complaining to you about what you did and did not do. I also think too that it's important for me to highlight that there is great variability in the diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, and that's why there's so many subtypes, because you can fall under multiple categories at once, and sometimes there's a lot of overlap. Like I said at the beginning of this video, there's overlap between other disorders, and there's also overlap under the umbrella of narcissism. So it gets kind of murky. Now, the next thing that I want you to think about is an envious parent. Mostly these kind of narcissistic parents, whether that's the vulnerable or the grandiose narcissist, they tend to be pretty haughty, arrogant, and angry, but also envious of their children. If you want to see a video that I did on envious parents, go ahead and check that out right above here at the cards. And I talk about jealousy of a parent. And, I've had the experience of being in a therapeutic encounter with a parent who's jealous of the child multiple times throughout my 14-year career, and I'm never comfortable with it. It is hard to wrap my mind around that a parent could be envious of their child. But if you're dealing with a vulnerable narcissist, if you're dealing with a grandiose narcissist, more than likely that parent may have some jealousy and some envy that they have held against you on the inside. And there may be times when it shows and it comes out, and they may be really good at hiding it at other times. And so, it's a really complicated puzzle, but keep that in mind. Most narcissistic, grandiose parents tend to be jealous of their children. This is a complicated topic, guys, and I always try to cap the time at 20 minutes that I do these particular videos, because we could go on and on and on. Stay tuned for my next video. I'm going to be talking about narcissism a little bit more in the context of fathers, so keep that in mind for next video. Thank you so much for being with me in today's video. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if this video was helpful, and that bell button so you get every notification that happens on my channel. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.